Millionaire finds his black ex-wife at a car dealership with triplets who looked just like him. His voice was deeper than she remembered, rougher around the edges. It sent heat racing through her body despite every logical reason to run. She'd forgotten how he could make her name sound like a prayer and a promise wrapped in velvet. Have you ever kept a secret that can destroy lives? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. The billionaire tech investor walked into a rundown car dealership in Charlotte and came face to face with a woman who vanished from his life 3 years ago. But she wasn't alone. 3 toddlers with his exact green eyes clung to her legs. The triplets he never knew existed weren't the only secret she'd been hiding. His father's will have been forged, and she had proof. What would you do if you discovered your ex-wife had been raising your children in secret? Have you ever lost someone you loved because of lies? Have you ever kept a secret that could destroy lives? Sometimes the biggest betrayals come from those we trust most. But what if the person you blamed was actually trying to protect you? Follow along as we uncover a mystery that's been buried for 3 years. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. She had been wiping down the same Honda for 10 minutes. Not because it was dirty, but because the black Tesla in the parking lot belonged to a ghost she thought she'd buried. Tasha Green's hands moved in slow circles across the hood while her mind raced. The Charlotte summer heat made sweat bead on her forehead, but the chill running down her spine had nothing to do with the weather. She knew that car. She knew those California plates. And she definitely knew the man climbing out of the driver's seat. "Mama, why'd you stop singing?" 3-year-old Marcus tugged at her yellow sundress, his chubby fingers sticky from the juice box she'd given him 20 minutes ago. His twin sisters, Sophia and Emma, sat on the cracked concrete playing with dollar store toys while their mother pretended the world hadn't just tilted off its axis. "I'm still singing, baby," she whispered, though her voice had died the moment she saw him. Ethan Wallace looked exactly like the man she'd married 5 years ago, and nothing like the broken person she'd left behind. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his expensive suit wrinkle-free despite the flight from San Francisco. Success wore him well. Too well. He moved across the lot like he owned it, which, knowing Ethan, he probably could buy within the hour. His green eyes, the same startling color their children had inherited, scanned the modest dealership with the calculating look she remembered from their marriage. Always analyzing, always planning 3 moves ahead. Those eyes found her, and time stopped. The impact hit her like a physical blow. 3 years of carefully built walls crumbled in seconds. Her breath caught, her knees went weak, and for a moment she was 21 again, watching the same man walk in her college coffee shop and turn her entire world upside down. "Hello, Tasha." His voice was deeper than she remembered, rougher around the edges. It sent heat racing through her body despite every logical reason to run. She'd forgotten how he could make her name sound like a prayer and a promise wrapped in velvet. "Ethan," she straightened, forcing steel into her spine. "What are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing." He stepped closer, and she caught the scent of his cologne. Expensive, masculine, achingly familiar. "I've been looking for you." "Well, you found me." She kept wiping the car, needing something to do with her hands. "Congratulations." "Tasha, we need to talk." "Mama." Sophia's voice cut through the tension. "Emma took my doll." Both children scrambled to their feet, running toward their mother with the urgency that only 3-year-olds could muster. Tasha's heart hammered as she watched Ethan's face change, watched him really see the children for the first time. The color drained from his skin. His mouth opened, then closed. His gaze moved from one child to the next, cataloging features, doing the math that any man would do when faced with 3 toddlers who looked exactly like him. "How old are they?" His voice was barely a whisper. Tasha pulled all 3 children close, their warm bodies grounding her in the moment. "That's not your concern." "The hell it isn't." Fire flashed in his eyes. "Tasha, how old are they?" The silence stretched between them like a chasm. In the distance, traffic hummed on the interstate. A radio played country music from the garage. Normal life continued while hers imploded. When little Marcus tugged on her dress and called her mama, Ethan's face went white. "How old are they?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Her silence was answer enough. The richest man in the room was staring at 3 children who had inherited more than just his eyes. They had his stubborn chin and his father's distinctive laugh. Ethan crouched down to the children's level, his expensive suit jacket pulling tight across his shoulders. Up close, the resemblance was undeniable. Marcus had his nose. Sophia had his grandmother's curls. Emma had the same stubborn set to her jaw that had gotten him through countless business deals. "Hey there," he said softly, his voice gentler than Tasha had heard it in years. "What are your names?" "I'm Marcus." The boy beamed, unaware of the storm brewing around him. "And that's Sophia and Emma. We're triplets." "Triplets," Ethan repeated, his voice hollow. He looked up at Tasha, and she saw the exact moment the timeline clicked into place. "They're mine." It wasn't a question. It was a statement filled with wonder, rage, and something that might have been heartbreak. "They're mine," Tasha corrected, pulling the children back toward her. "You lost the right to claim them when you chose your business over our marriage." "I never chose." He stood abruptly, towering over her. "You left, Tasha. You disappeared without a word. No note, no explanation, nothing. I came home to an empty house and divorce papers. You think I wanted to leave?" The words exploded out of her before she could stop them. "You think I wanted to raise 3 babies alone while you got to rebuild your perfect little empire? Then why did you?" The question hung in the air like smoke. She could tell him the truth about the threats, about the money, about the choice between his safety and her silence. But 3 years of protecting him had become a habit she couldn't break. "Mama, why is everyone yelling?" Sophia's bottom lip trembled, and Tasha immediately knelt to comfort her. "Nobody's yelling, baby. The nice man was just—" "I'm not nice, man," Ethan interrupted, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm—" He stopped, looking at Tasha with desperate eyes. "What did you tell them about me?" "Nothing." The word came out harder than she intended. There was nothing to tell. The lie cut deep, and she watched it hit him like a physical blow. His jaw tightened, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. This was the Ethan she remembered from their worst fights. Controlled fury barely contained beneath the civilized surface. 3 years, he said quietly. 3 years I've been wondering what I did wrong. 3 years thinking you stopped loving me. I never stopped, she caught herself, glancing at the children. This isn't the place for this conversation. Then where is... He pulled out his phone, fingers flying over the screen. I'm canceling my flight. I'm staying until you give me answers. Ethan, no, you can't. Watch me. He pocketed the phone and stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. I've built $1 billion company from nothing. You really think I can't handle whatever scared you away? As Ethan knelt to the children's level, little Sophia whispered, Mama, why does the man have daddy eyes? Before Tasha could answer, Clyde emerged from the back office, his weathered face hardening when he saw Ethan. I think you need to leave, he said, his hand moving toward the desk drawer. The old war veteran had seen enough men like Ethan Wallace to know when power was about to crush the powerless. But he'd never seen one who looked at a woman like she was both salvation and damnation. Clyde Thompson stepped between Ethan and Tasha with the fluid motion of a man who'd spent 40 years protecting what mattered. His gray beard was neatly trimmed, his work shirt pressed despite the grease stains, and his blue eyes held the kind of steady calm that came from facing down worse things than angry billionaires. You heard me, son, Clyde said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd commanded respect long before he'd earned it. Time to go. This is between me and my wife, Ethan replied, not moving an inch. Ex-wife, Tasha corrected quickly. And he's right, Clyde. This is my problem. No. The older man's hand rested on his hip. Inches from where Tasha knew, he kept his service weapon. This became my problem the day you showed up here with those babies and bruises on your arms. Ethan's head snapped toward Tasha, his eyes dark with sudden fury. Bruises? It's not what you think, she said quickly. I fell. She fell running from whoever sent her those threatening letters, Clyde interrupted. The ones that stopped coming right around the time you filed for divorce. The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. He staggered backward, his face going pale. What letters? The ones telling her to stay away from you if she wanted to keep breathing. Clyde's voice was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather. Professional job, no return address. But whoever sent them knew exactly how to scare a pregnant woman. Pregnant? Ethan's voice cracked. You were pregnant when you left? Tasha closed her eyes, feeling the last of her carefully constructed walls crumble. Ethan, please, just go. Like hell. He turned to Clyde, and for the first time since entering the dealership, he looked less like a businessman and more like a man fighting for his life. Who sent the letters? Don't know, but they came on expensive paper. The kind your people use. My people. Ethan's laugh was bitter. You think I threatened my own wife? I think you come from a world where people clean up problems quietly. Clyde's hand moved closer to his weapon. I think a poor black girl married to a rich white boy makes certain folks nervous. I never gave a damn about any of that. No, Clyde agreed. But somebody did. Somebody with enough money to make problems disappear and enough power to make sure they stayed gone. The garage fell silent except for the children's chatter and the distant hum of traffic. Ethan stood frozen, his mind clearly racing through possibilities, connections, people who might have wanted Tasha gone. The lawyer, he whispered. Morrison. He handled the divorce papers. Same man who's been sniffing around here, asking questions about Tasha, Clyde confirmed. Same man who suggested she might be happier somewhere else. When Clyde pulled out a manila envelope marked Wallace Estate, urgent, Ethan's blood turned to ice. Your daddy's lawyer came looking for her 6 months ago, Clyde said quietly. Said she had something that belonged to your family. Something worth killing for. The envelope contained proof that would either destroy Ethan's empire or reveal why the woman he loved had vanished without a trace. Ethan's hand shook as he opened the manila folder, spilling documents across the hood of the Honda. Legal papers, bank statements, and what looked like a copy of his father's will covered the war medal. But these weren't the documents he'd seen 3 years ago when his father died. What is this? He asked, his voice barely steady. Insurance, Clyde replied. Your girl's smarter than people give her credit for. She made copies before she ran. Tasha stepped closer, the children playing at her feet while she pointed to a specific paragraph. Read line 47. Ethan's eyes found the section, and his world tilted. The will stated clearly that upon his father's death, a trust fund worth $12 million would be established for any children born to Ethan Wallace and Tasha Green Wallace, legitimate or otherwise. 12 million, he whispered. For our children. Keep reading, Tasha said quietly. Line 52 made his blood freeze. The trust was to be administered by Tasha Green Wallace, as the children's mother and my son's chosen partner, regardless of their marital status at the time of my death. He left you control of $12 million. Ethan looked up at her, confusion and anger warring in his expression. Why didn't you tell me? Because I never got these papers. She pulled out another document. The will Morrison had shown him 3 years ago. This is what your lawyer gave me. The second will was different. No mention of children. No trust fund. No provision for Tasha. Just a standard inheritance, leaving everything to Ethan, with Morrison as executor. He forged it, Ethan said, the pieces clicking together. Morrison forged my father's will. Gets better, Clyde said grimly. Show him the bank records. Tasha spread out financial documents showing transfers from the Wallace estate to various accounts. $12 million had indeed been moved, but not to any trust for the children. It had been funneled through shell companies, offshore accounts, and dummy corporations. Morrison stole the money, Ethan said, his voice dangerous. He stole our children's inheritance. And when I got pregnant and started asking questions about your father's wishes, he decided I was a problem that needed solving. Tasha's voice was steady, but he could see the fear in her eyes. The threatening letters started the week after I mentioned the trust fund to him. So you left to protect me. The truth hit him like a physical blow. You knew if you stayed, if you fought this, he'd come after both of us. I knew if I stayed, our children would grow up without a father. She touched his arm gently. I couldn't let that happen. The parking lot felt too small, too exposed. Ethan looked around, suddenly aware that they were standing in the open with documents that could destroy a man's career and possibly get them all killed. The documents showed Ethan's father had left Tasha's family a substantial inheritance. Money that would have prevented their divorce, their separation, their years of struggle. But someone had made sure she never received it. Someone who knew exactly how to destroy their marriage from the inside. She had trusted the family lawyer who promised to handle everything quietly, never realizing he was the architect of her destruction. The memory came flooding back as Tasha stared at the forged documents. 3 years ago, sitting in Morrison's polished office while he explained why the divorce needed to happen quickly, quietly, without any messy investigations into the estate. "Mrs. Wallace," he'd said, his voice smooth as silk, "your husband is under tremendous pressure right now. The company's scandal, the media attention. Additional complications would be devastating." She'd been 6 months pregnant then, carrying triplets that were already making her exhausted and emotional. Morrison had seemed so concerned, so professional in his charcoal suit and Harvard law degree framed on the wall. "What kind of complications?" she'd asked. "Questions about your marriage, about whether you married him for money, about whether the children are really his." Morrison had leaned forward, his gray eyes kind but firm. "I'm not saying these things are true, but in today's climate, perception matters more than reality." The lies had been so smooth, so reasonable. He'd made her believe she was protecting Ethan by disappearing. Made her think the threats were coming from business rivals, not from him. "He convinced me you'd be better off without me," Tasha said now, watching Ethan's face go through stages of grief. "Said the scandal would destroy your company, your reputation, everything you'd worked for. And you believed him?" Ethan's voice was raw. "I was 24, pregnant, and scared." She lifted her chin. "He was your father's lawyer, your family's friend. Why wouldn't I trust him? Because he was stealing from us," Ethan said, his voice getting dangerously quiet. "Because he was planning this from the moment my father died." Clyde cleared his throat. "Gets worse. Show him the other thing." Tasha hesitated, then pulled out a photograph. It showed Morrison leaving a restaurant with a woman Ethan didn't recognize. Nothing suspicious, except for the timestamp, 2 days before his father's death. "Who is she?" Ethan asked. "Medical examiner who signed off on your father's autopsy," Clyde said. "Same woman who ruled the heart attack was natural. No need for further investigation." The implications hit Ethan like a sledgehammer. "You think Morrison killed my father?" "I think your father found out about the money and was going to fire him," Tasha said quietly. "I think Morrison had 12 million reasons to make sure that didn't happen. And when you got pregnant, when you started asking questions about provisions for the children, he realized you were a threat to his perfect plan," Clyde added. Ethan's phone buzzed. The caller ID made his blood run cold. Morrison's office. With shaking hands, he answered. "Ethan, my boy." Morrison's familiar voice was warm, friendly. "I heard you were in Charlotte. Business or pleasure?" "Business," Ethan said carefully, his eyes never leaving Tasha's face. "Excellent. I actually have some matters to discuss with you. About your father's estate. There are some irregularities that need addressing." When Ethan's phone rang and the caller ID showed his father's old lawyer, he answered with controlled fury. "I know what you did," he said quietly. The response chilled him. "You know nothing, boy. And if you want to keep those children safe, you'll keep it that way." The threat against his children activated something primal in Ethan Wallace. The same instinct that had built his empire, now focused on protecting the family he'd just discovered. Ethan paced his hotel room like a caged tiger, his phone pressed to his ear as he barked orders to his security team. "I want everything on Morrison. Bank records, client lists, who he talks to, who he sleeps with. Everything." The city lights of Charlotte twinkled below, but all he could see was the fear in his children's eyes when Morrison's voice had turned cold. Tasha sat on the bed, watching Marcus, Sophia, and Michael color in their books. They seemed oblivious to the danger, their little faces focused on staying inside the lines. But she knew better. Children always sensed when adults were scared, even when they try to hide it. "You can't just throw money at this problem," she said quietly, not looking up from where she was braiding Sophia's hair. This isn't some business deal you can buy your way out of. Ethan stopped pacing. Then what do you suggest? We sit here and wait for him to make good on his threat. I suggest you listen to me for once. Her voice carried an edge that made the children look up. She forced a smile and handed them fresh crayons. Go play in the other room for a minute, babies. Mommy and Daddy need to talk. The word Daddy hit him like a physical blow. 3 hours ago, he'd been a bachelor billionaire. Now he was a father of 3, and someone wanted to hurt his kids because of who he was. Once the children were settled in the adjoining room, Tasha stood up. Morrison isn't just some lawyer, Ethan. He's connected to people who don't care about your money or your influence. They care about control. What kind of people? She walked to the window, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. The kind who killed your father. The words hung in the air like smoke. Ethan felt the ground shift beneath his feet. My father died in a car accident. Your father was murdered because he was going to expose Morrison's clients. Real estate developers, city officials, judges, all of them getting rich off land deals that displaced poor families. She turned to face him. My grandmother's house was one of the first they took. Your father was trying to stop them. How do you know all this? Because I was there the night he came to see my grandmother. He brought documents, evidence. He said he was going to make things right. Her voice cracked. He was killed 2 days later. Ethan sank into a chair, his world reshaping itself around this new truth. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was scared. Because I was pregnant and alone and a 21-year-old black girl going up against powerful white men. She sat across from him. And because I thought you'd choose them over me. The accusation stung because part of him wondered if she was right. 3 years ago, he'd been different, ambitious, ruthless, willing to sacrifice anything for success. But looking at his children coloring in the next room, he knew that man was gone. I'm not that person anymore, he said. I know. She reached across the space between them and touched his hand. That's why I'm still here. The hotel room door burst open without warning. Ethan jumped up, placing himself between his family and the intruders, but it was too late. Men in dark suits filled the doorway, and their leader smiled coldly. Mr. Wallace, you need to come with us. They took the billionaire, but left the woman and children. A calculated move that told Tasha everything she needed to know about who was really in control. The warehouse smelled of rust and motor oil, shadows dancing in the dim light filtering through broken windows. Ethan's hands were zip-tied behind his back, but his mind was already working through escape scenarios. He'd been tied to a metal chair for what felt like hours, though it could have been minutes. Time moved differently when fear was your only companion. Morrison stepped out of the shadows, his expensive suit looking out of place in the grimy warehouse. Your father was a stubborn man, Ethan. Idealistic. He thought he could change the world with evidence and good intentions. Let me go. This is between us. Oh, but it's not. Morrison pulled up a chair and sat down casually, like they were having coffee. You see, your father made a promise to leave that woman's family alone. When he broke that promise, well, he shrugged. Consequences had to be faced. Ethan tested the restraints, feeling the plastic cut into his wrists. What do you want? I want you to disappear. Take your little family and go somewhere far away. Stop asking questions. Stop digging into the past. Morrison's voice turned cold. Because if you don't, those beautiful children of yours might have accidents. And we both know how dangerous the world can be for mixed-race kids in the wrong neighborhoods. The threat hit Ethan like a physical blow. You sick? I'm practical. Morrison interrupted. Your father wasn't. He died because he couldn't let sleeping dogs lie. Don't make the same mistake. Meanwhile, across town, Tasha was making calls. Not to the police. She knew better than that. Some of Charlotte's finest were on Morrison's payroll. Instead, she dialed a number she'd memorized but never used. Agent Torres? This is Tasha Green. You told me to call if Morrison ever made contact again. She watched the children play with toys she'd bought from the hotel gift shop, their innocence a stark contrast to the danger closing in around them. He has Ethan. The FBI agent's voice was crisp and professional. Where are you? Marriott downtown. Room 1247. How fast can you get here? 20 minutes. Don't move. Don't answer the door for anyone but me. Tasha hung up and gathered the children close. We're going to play a game, okay? We're going to be very quiet and very still until the nice lady comes to see us. Where's Daddy? Marcus asked, his green eyes, so much like his father's, filled with worry. Daddy's going to be fine, she said, hoping it was true. But we need to be brave for him, okay? Back in the warehouse, Morrison was losing patience. Your silence is admirable, Ethan, but ultimately pointless. We know about the children. We know about the money your father left. We know everything. Then you know I'll never stop fighting for them. Morrison smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That's what I was afraid you'd say. He pulled out his phone and dialed number. It's time, he said simply. But before he could say more, the warehouse door exploded inward. Tasha's voice cut through the darkness like a blade. Not if I have anything to say about it. She had run from confrontation her entire life, until the day the father of her children needed her to be brave. The warehouse floor was cold concrete beneath their feet as they moved through shadows, every step bringing them closer to freedom or deeper into danger. Tasha had arrived with more than just courage. She'd brought FBI agent Maria Torres and a tactical team that knew how to handle men like Morrison. This is FBI. Release the hostage and come out with your hands visible. The voice echoed through the cavernous space, and Tasha felt her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd spotted Ethan through a broken window, tied to a chair while Morrison paced around him like a predator. The sight had filled her with a rage she didn't know she possessed. "I count 4 men," Torres whispered into her radio. "Subject is restrained, but appears unharmed." Moving to position Alpha, Tasha crouched behind a stack of rusted barrels, watching the agent spread out. She wasn't supposed to be here. Torres had tried to leave her at the hotel with backup agents, but she'd insisted. These men had stolen 3 years of her life, had forced her to raise her children alone, had threatened her family. She wasn't sitting this one out. Inside the warehouse, Morrison was getting desperate. "You brought the FBI? How incredibly stupid of you, Ethan. Now, they all have to die. You're outnumbered," Ethan said, trying to keep his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "It's over. It's never over." Morrison pulled out a gun, and Ethan felt his blood turn to ice. "Your father thought he could expose us. You thought you could waltz back into town and play happy family. Both of you were wrong." But Morrison had made a crucial mistake. He'd underestimated the woman who'd been watching over Ethan Wallace for 3 years, even from a distance. While the FBI agents moved into position, Tasha had found another way in. The old warehouse had loading docks on the east side, and years of working at Clyde's dealership had taught her how to move quietly through spaces filled with machinery and shadows. She'd also learned how to use tools as weapons. When Morrison raised his gun toward Ethan, she was ready. The wrench caught him across the shoulder, spinning him around and sending the gun clattering across the concrete. The FBI agents rushed in, but Tasha was already cutting Ethan's restraints with a utility knife she'd grabbed from her purse. "Are you hurt?" she asked, her hands shaking as she worked. "I'm fine," he said, though his wrists were raw and bleeding. "The kids are safe." Torres has people watching them. The zip ties parted, and Ethan pulled her against him, burying his face in her hair. She smelled like the vanilla lotion she'd used since they were married, and for a moment, he could pretend the last 3 years hadn't happened. "How did you find me?" he whispered. "I never stopped watching over you," she said, then pulled back to look at him. "I had people keeping track of where you went, who you met with. I knew Morrison would come for you eventually. You had people watching me?" Before she could answer, Torres approached with Morrison in handcuffs. "We've got him, and thanks to the wire you were wearing, we got everything we need." Tasha smiled through her tears. "Did you really think I'd let you walk into danger without backup?" The FBI agent who'd been tracking the conspiracy for 3 years was the same woman who'd helped Tasha disappear. And now she was ready to bring down the entire network. The FBI field office buzzed with activity as agents worked to crack 3 years of carefully constructed lies. Documents covered every surface, each piece of evidence another nail in the conspiracy's coffin. Tasha sat in a conference room, watching Ethan pace while Agent Torres explained the scope of what they'd uncovered. Morrison wasn't working alone, Torres said, spreading photographs across the table. We've identified 12 city officials, 6 judges, and at least 20 real estate developers involved in the land grab scheme. Your father stumbled onto it by accident when he was reviewing property records for his will. Ethan stopped pacing. His will. He planned to leave substantial holdings to community development projects. When he discovered the corruption, he started documenting everything. Torres pulled out a thick folder. These are copies of the files he hid before his death. Bank records, recorded conversations, property transfers, enough to send dozens of people to prison. Where did you get these? Tasha asked, though she already suspected the answer. From you, Torres said simply. You gave them to me 3 years ago when you came to the bureau for help. The room fell silent. Ethan turned to stare at Tasha, his face a mixture of confusion and hurt. You've been working with the FBI this whole time? I've been trying to protect you, she said quietly. Your father came to my grandmother's house the night before he died. He was scared, Ethan. He knew they were going to kill him. Why didn't you tell me? Because you were about to announce your Senate campaign. Because Morrison was one of your biggest supporters. Because I was a poor black girl claiming that your father's lawyer was a murderer. She stood up, her voice growing stronger. Who do you think people would have believed? Torres leaned forward. She made the right choice. We needed someone on the inside, someone Morrison trusted. Tasha's been feeding us information for years. What information? Ethan demanded. Client lists, financial records, conversations she overheard when Morrison thought she was just the hired help. Torres pulled out another folder. She's been documenting everything, building a case that will put these people away forever. Ethan felt the ground shifting beneath his feet again. The scandal that destroyed our marriage was manufactured. Tasha finished. Morrison needed me discredited, needed you to doubt me. So he created fake evidence of an affair, planted it where you'd find it. And I fell for it. You fell for it because you loved me, she said, her voice breaking. And because men like Morrison know exactly how to weaponize that love against us. The conference room door opened, and Agent Torres looked up. What is it, Johnson? Morrison's lawyer is here. He wants to make a deal. Torres smiled grimly. Tell him we're not interested. We have everything we need. But as the agents prepare to leave, Ethan grabbed Tasha's arm. The children, do they know? They know their daddy is a good man who fights for people who can't fight for themselves. That's all they need to know. And us? What happens to us? She looked at him for a long moment. I don't know. But for the first time in 3 years, I think we have a chance to find out. Building a family from the ashes of betrayal required more than love. It demanded the courage to trust again. The safe house sat on a quiet street in suburban Charlotte, its white picket fence and rose garden offering the illusion of normalcy. Inside, the sound of children's laughter mixed with adult conversation about second chances. Ethan had been living there for 2 weeks, and he was still learning how to be a father. Marcus, don't pull your sister's hair, he said, settling the dispute with the patience of someone who'd negotiated billion-dollar deals. Use your words. She took my truck, Marcus complained, his bottom lip jutting out in a way that reminded Ethan of his own childhood tantrums. Sophia, give your brother his truck back. There are plenty of toys for everyone. Watching him with the children, Tasha felt something shift inside her chest. This was the man she'd fallen in love with. Patient, kind, protective. The ruthless businessman who'd chosen power over family was gone, replaced by someone who understood what really mattered. You're getting good at this, she said, settling beside him on the couch. I have good teachers. He watched Michael stack blocks with intense concentration. I missed so much. You're here now. That's what matters. They've been having conversations like this for days, careful, testing the waters of what they could be to each other. The FBI had assured them that Morrison's network was crumbling, that the immediate danger was over. But trust, once broken, was harder to rebuild than an empire. I keep thinking about what you said, Ethan said quietly, about how you thought I'd choose them over you. Ethan, no, let me finish. You were right. 3 years ago, I would have. I was so focused on building something that would last, I forgot that none of it means anything without people to share it with. The children had moved on to coloring, their heads bent over their books with the serious concentration only kids could manage. They'd adapted to having their father around with the resilience of the young, though Tasha noticed how they watched him sometimes, as if making sure he wouldn't disappear again. "They're amazing," he said, following her gaze. "Smart, funny, stubborn as hell. They get that from you. And beautiful like their mother." He reached over and touched her hand. "I want to do this right, Tasha. I want to be the man you thought you were marrying. You already are." The moment was interrupted by Agent Torres calling from the kitchen. "Tasha, can you come here for a minute?" She found Torres hanging up the phone, her face serious. "What is it?" "Morrison's been found dead in his cell. Apparent suicide." Tasha felt her blood turn cold. Suicide. That's what it looks like. But we both know men like Morrison don't usually take the easy way out. Torres leaned against the counter. "I'm recommending you stay in protective custody for another month, just to be safe." "You think someone killed him?" "I think dead men can't testify against their co-conspirators. And there are still people out there who want this whole thing to disappear." From the living room came the sound of children giggling and a father's voice reading a bedtime story. "Normal sounds. Safe sounds. We'll stay," Tasha said. "Whatever it takes to keep them safe." But as she returned to the living room, she couldn't shake the feeling that Morrison's death was just the beginning of something new and dangerous. The safe house became a fortress when shadows from Ethan's father's past came calling for blood. The first sign of trouble came at 2 a.m. when the security system started beeping. Ethan jolted awake on the couch, instantly alert. He'd been sleeping in the living room, closer to the children's rooms, ever since Torres had told them about Morrison's death. The habit of a man who'd learned that danger could come at any time. "What is it?" Tasha whispered, appearing in the doorway in her robe. "Motion sensors in the backyard." He was already moving toward the gun safe Torres had installed. "Get the kids." She didn't argue. 3 years of running had taught her to trust her instincts, and right now, every instinct was screaming danger. She slipped into the children's room and gently shook Marcus awake. "Hey baby, we're gonna play that quiet game again, okay? Wake up your brother and sister, but don't make any noise." Marcus rubbed his eyes, but nodded. At barely 3 years old, he'd already learned that sometimes grown-ups needed children to be brave. Meanwhile, Ethan was on the phone with Torres. 3 men in the backyard. "They're not trying to hide. They want us to know they're here. Stay put. Team's 5 minutes out." "I don't think we have 5 minutes." The front window exploded inward, glass spraying across the living room floor. Men in dark clothes poured through the opening, and Ethan realized with cold certainty that these weren't the same amateur thugs Morrison had used. These were professionals. "Upstairs," he shouted at Tasha, firing 2 quick shots that sent the intruders diving for cover. They made it to the second floor, but barely. Ethan could hear boots on the stairs, voices coordinating their search. The children were crying now, scared and confused, and his heart was breaking for them. "There's a panic room," Tasha said, pulling him toward the master bedroom. Torres showed me. The hidden door was behind the closet, steel reinforced and designed to hold until help arrived. But as they huddled inside with the children, Ethan knew help might not come in time. "Why won't they leave us alone?" Sophia whispered, her small hand clutching his shirt. "Because some people are scared of the truth," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "But we're not going to let them win." Through the panic room's monitor, they could see the men searching the house, destroying furniture, looking for something. One of them was talking on a radio, and Ethan caught fragments of the conversation. "Not here, must have taken it with them. What are they looking for?" Tasha asked. "Evidence. Something Morrison had that could still hurt them." Ethan pulled out his phone, but there was no signal. The panic room was designed to block electronic surveillance, which meant they were truly cut off. Then Michael, who'd been quiet through the whole ordeal, tugged on Ethan's sleeve. "Daddy, the bad man." Sure enough, the monitor showed the intruders retreating through the broken window. But instead of relief, Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "They're not giving up," he said. "They're regrouping." The sound of sirens in the distance suggested Torres' team was finally arriving. But as they emerged for the panic room, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "The children are beautiful. It would be a shame if something happened to them. We know where you are. We know where you're going. There's nowhere to run." The old veteran had been waiting 40 years to settle a score, and now he had the perfect opportunity to protect the family he'd grown to love. Clyde's auto shop sat on the outskirts of Charlotte, surrounded by acres of junkyard and scrap metal. It wasn't the kind of place most people would think to look for a billionaire and his family, which was exactly why Agent Torres had suggested it as their new safe house. "You sure about this, old man?" Torres asked, checking her weapon one more time. "These people aren't playing games." Clyde spat tobacco juice into a coffee can and smiled grimly. "Neither am I. Been waiting 40 years for someone to come after what's mine." Ethan watched from the office window as his children played in the back room, their laughter a strange counterpoint to the weapons being distributed around the shop. Tasha was helping them build a fort out of cardboard boxes, keeping them distracted while the adults prepared for war. "Tell me about the layout," Torres said, spreading blueprints across Clyde's desk. "3 ways in," Clyde said, pointing. "Front door, back door, and that loading dock. But there's also the drainage tunnel that runs under the property. Built it during the Cold War, back when people worried about different kinds of enemies. Can you get the family out through there? If it comes to that." Clyde's weathered face was serious. "But I'd rather make our stand here. This is my ground, my rules." They've been planning for 6 hours, ever since the attack on the safe house. The FBI had arrested 2 of the intruders, but the third had escaped, and Torres' sources suggested that more were coming. The conspiracy Morrison had been part of was bigger than anyone had imagined, reaching into federal agencies and foreign interests. "Why can't we just leave?" Ethan asked. "Take the kids and disappear?" "Because running doesn't solve anything," Tasha said from the doorway. "We tried that. It didn't work." She was right, and he knew it. They'd been running for 3 years, and it had only made things worse. The time for hiding was over. Besides, Clyde added, "These bastards killed your daddy. Time someone paid for that." The first attack came at sunset. Black SUVs roared into the yard, men with assault rifles spilling out like ants from a disturbed nest. But Clyde had been preparing for this moment since Vietnam, and his auto shop was more fortress than business. Steel shutters slammed down over the windows. Spotlights blazed alive, turning the yard into a killing field. And from hidden positions throughout the property, Clyde's friends, other veterans who'd been waiting for a chance to fight for something that mattered, opened fire. "Get down," Ethan shouted, pulling Tasha and the children to the floor as bullets shattered the front window. But the attack was already faltering. The men in the SUVs had expected to find a scared family hiding in a garage. Instead, they'd walked into a trap set by soldiers who'd been fighting longer than they'd been alive. "Torres, we've got them boxed in." Clyde's voice crackled over the radio. "But there's more coming." Satellite phones picking up chatter about a second wave. Through the chaos, Ethan heard something that made his blood freeze. His phone was ringing, and the caller ID showed a number he recognized. "It's over, Ethan," the voice said when he answered. "Send out the woman and children, and maybe we'll let them live." She had learned to live without him once, but now she couldn't imagine a future that didn't include the man who'd fought armies to protect their children. The battle for Clyde's auto shop had lasted 3 hours. When the smoke cleared, 6 men lay dead in the yard, and the survivors had fled into the night. But the victory fell hollow because everyone knew it was just the beginning. "We can't keep living like this," Tasha said, sitting on the steps outside the shop while the children played in the dirt nearby. They seemed remarkably resilient, treating the whole thing like an adventure. Kids adapted to anything if their parents stayed calm. "I know." Ethan sat beside her, his shirt torn and his hands dirty from the fight. "Torres thinks she can get us into witness protection. New identities, new lives, and spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders? It's better than the alternative." She was quiet for a long moment, watching Marcus show Michael how to make mud pies. "Is it? Because I've been thinking about what kind of life we want to give them. What kind of example we want to set." "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe it's time to stop running. Maybe it's time to stand up and fight back." Ethan studied her profile in the fading light. "You're talking about going public, exposing everything. I'm talking about finishing where your father started. taking these people down permanently, no matter what it costs us. It could cost us everything. We've already lost everything once. We survived. She turned to look at him, and we're stronger now. Both of us. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, turning it over in his hands. I've been carrying this around for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment. But I'm starting to think there's no such thing as the right moment when you're living in a war zone. Her breath caught. Ethan, I know we have history. I know I hurt you. I know there are things we still need to work through. He opened the box, revealing a simple diamond ring that caught the last rays of sunlight. But I also know that I love you. I love our children, and I want to spend whatever time we have left making up for the time we lost. Tears were streaming down her face now, but she was smiling. You're asking me to marry you in the middle of a junkyard while people are trying to kill us. I'm asking you to marry me because people are trying to kill us. Because life is short and unpredictable and we don't get guarantees. He slipped off the step and got down on one knee. Tasha Green, will you marry me? Again, the children had stopped playing and were watching with wide eyes. Marcus clapped his hands. Daddy's giving Mommy a present. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes, I'll marry you. He slipped the ring on her finger, and she pulled him up for a kiss that tasted like hope and new beginnings. The children cheered and ran over to join the hug, and for a moment, they were just a family celebrating love. But even as they held each other, Ethan knew the real fight was just beginning. Tomorrow they would go public. Tomorrow they would tell the world everything they knew about the conspiracy that had cost them 3 years. Tonight, they were simply a family preparing for war. The woman who once believed she'd never have a family now carried new life while watching her husband play with the children she'd protected alone for 3 years. 6 months later, the courthouse in Charlotte was packed with reporters and cameras. The trial of the century, they were calling it. Federal prosecutors had used Ethan's father's evidence to bring down a network of corruption that reached into every level of government. Tasha sat in the front row, her hand resting on her growing belly. The baby was due in 3 months, and she could feel him kicking whenever the courtroom got too loud. He was going to be a fighter, just like his father. Are you comfortable? Ethan whispered, leaning over from the witness stand where he'd just finished testifying. I'm fine, she said, though her back was killing her. The kids, Clyde's got them. They're building a treehouse. The old veteran had become an unofficial grandfather to the children, teaching them about cars and responsibility and how to stand up to bullies. His garage had become their second home, a place where they could be normal kids instead of the center of a media storm. Mr. Wallace, the prosecutor said, can you tell the court what you discovered about your father's death? Ethan's voice was steady and clear. He was murdered because he was going to expose a conspiracy that had been operating in this city for over 20 years. Men who were supposed to serve the public were instead serving themselves, stealing land from poor families and getting rich off their suffering. The defense attorney objected, but the judge overruled him. They had recordings, documents, witness testimony. The conspiracy was crumbling under the weight of its own corruption. During the lunch break, Tasha and Ethan walked through the courthouse plaza, surrounded by FBI agents but finally free to live their lives in the open. The children ran ahead, chasing pigeons and laughing with the carefree joy of kids who no longer had to be afraid. How do you feel? She asked. Tired, relieved, scared. He helped her sit on a bench, but mostly grateful. For you, for the kids, for this. He gestured to her belly. He's going to be born into a different world than the triplets were. A better world, one where the truth matters. The trial would go on for 3 more weeks, but everyone knew how it would end. The evidence was overwhelming, the witnesses credible. Justice, delayed for 3 years, was finally coming. That evening, they had dinner at Clyde's shop. The old man had cooked hamburgers on a grill made from a car part, and the children were covered in grease and ketchup in pure happiness. Uncle Clyde, Sophia said, tugging on his sleeve, Mommy says the baby's going to be a boy. Is that right? Clyde winked at her. What do you think about that? I think he's going to be trouble, Marcus said seriously. Like Michael. Hey, Michael protested, throwing a French fry at his brother. Ethan watched his family laugh and bicker and love each other, and felt a peace he hadn't experienced in years. They'd been through hell, but they'd survived. They'd been broken, but they'd healed. They'd been separated, but they'd found their way back to each other. "What are you thinking about?" Tasha asked. "Forever," he said simply. "I'm thinking about forever." The final secret wasn't about betrayal or conspiracy. It was about a love so deep that she'd sacrificed everything to protect the man who owned her heart. The baby was born on a Tuesday in March, screaming his way into the world with the same determination that had defined his parents' fight for justice. Ethan held his son for the first time in the hospital room, marveling at how something so small could contain so much hope. "He looks like you," Tasha said, exhausted but radiant. "He looks like trouble," Marcus observed from his position on the hospital bed, where he was carefully examining his new brother's fingers and toes. "All babies are trouble," Sophia said wisely. "That's why they're so cute." Michael, ever the practical one, was more interested in the vending machine than the baby. "Can we get chips now?" The conspiracy trial had ended 2 weeks earlier with guilty verdicts across the board. 12 men were going to prison, including the federal judge who'd been taking bribes for 15 years. The city was cleaning house, and real change was finally coming to Charlotte. But none of that mattered right now. Right now, there was just a family gathered around a hospital bed, welcoming new life into the world. "There's something I need to tell you," Tasha said quietly when the children had been taken to the cafeteria by one of the nurses. "About why I really left 3 years ago." Ethan looked up from the baby, concern flickering in his eyes. "What is it?" "I was pregnant when I left. Not with the triplets. I was pregnant with another baby. A little girl." Her voice broke slightly. "I lost her at 5 months. The stress, the fear, the constant running, it was too much." The room fell silent except for the baby's soft breathing. Ethan sat down on the bed beside her, careful not to disturb the newborn. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I blamed myself. Because I thought if I'd been stronger, if I'd fought harder, if I'd trusted you more." She wiped her eyes. "I thought you'd blame me too." "Never," he said fiercely. "God, Tasha, you've been carrying this alone for 3 years." "I couldn't tell anyone. Morrison's people were watching. If they'd known I was weak, vulnerable." She looked at the baby in his arms. "I couldn't risk the triplets too." Ethan shifted the baby to one arm and pulled her close with the other. "You're the strongest person I know, the bravest. What you did, protecting our children, fighting for justice, that took more courage than I ever had. I'm not brave. I'm just stubborn. Sometimes that's the same thing." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their son sleep. Through the window, they could see the Charlotte skyline, a city that was finally learning to live up to its promises. The children's laughter drifted in from the hallway, where they were probably charming the nurses into giving them extra cookies. "What do you want to name him?" Ethan asked. "I was thinking Thomas, after your father, the man who started all this. Thomas Wallace." "I like it. Thomas Wallace, the boy who was born free," she said softly. "Free to grow up in a world where truth matters more than power." And in that moment, holding their son while their other children played nearby, they knew they'd finally won the war that had defined their lives. Love had conquered fear, truth had defeated lies, and family had proven stronger than any conspiracy. The reunion was complete. If this story of love, betrayal, and redemption touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that prove love can conquer anything. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in Tasha's situation? What does it mean to fight for family? And remember, sometimes the greatest victories come from the courage to trust again.